Welcome into another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. This is a Stay Wolk UGA recruiting show edition with my guy Jordan Hill. We have as jam-packed of a recruiting show as we've had. I feel like there is so much to talk about. Kirby Smart gave us plenty to talk about based on from his Tuesday press conference. We're going to get into some of his comments around NIL and revenue share cap and the transfer portal and the mayhem that is going on behind the scenes there. He talked with our guy Josh Pate as well in a one-on-one sit down earlier or a couple weeks ago where he talks about some of this as well. So we're going to break some of that down. The house settlement that's coming up maybe on Monday, maybe after that, we're going to just get into all the details as we see them. We've obviously talked about this some in previous shows, but we're really reaching an inflection point when it comes to that. So we're going to get into all of that. We know May 5th is going to be an important date for Georgia as well, with Jared Curtis making a decision. We're going to talk a little bit about Georgia quarterback recruiting, what it means if Georgia lands Jared Curtis, what it means if Georgia doesn't land Jared Curtis. We've got an awesome interview with Georgia safety commit Zech Fort from IMG Academy. Sat down with us for about half an hour, so we're going to get into all of that with Zech as well. And then, per usual, we'll have some of the fun segments at the end of the show, arrow pointing up, predict a commit, and I've teased a little bit of a curveball to you, Jordan. We've got so much going on. I might even curveball my curveball because I just don't know what all we can get into. I don't even know if you or I have the mental bandwidth for any predict to commit curveballs. But this is going to be a jam-packed show. I hope you're excited for it, Jordan.
I am. I think it's going to be fun. I think especially the discussion with the house settlement, just really interesting because I think, Ben, you're probably right where I am, where I kind of feel like I'm learning on the fly. And I honestly, as we'll talk about with what Kirby Smart said, I learned a lot from sort of what Kirby was saying. But no, I'm excited for it. I always love doing the Stay Wolk show. And yeah, excited to get this one going.
I'll also say, hat tip right before we hopped on. We knew this was going to be the topic of our conversation today, or the house settlement and revenue share. Like that was going to be the basis of what we were going to be talking about today. Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports also comes out with a report like about an hour before we started, went live here that has a lot of important details in it as well. We were going to cover a lot of those things, but I think it just added some legitimacy to what we're going to talk about here as well. So I will point out some of those things that we maybe have learned through that Yahoo Sports reporting from Ross as well. We'll just dive straight into the house settlement side of things. And we covered this. We talked, I don't remember exactly the date on the show, but I think it was in the February range when Georgia was having some shifts in its athletic department and with the collective and what that was going to mean for, how much money Georgia was going to have for revenue share, what the cap meant. I used some buzz phrasing above the cap. We're going to get into all of that here. But the reason why I think this has become such a talking point over the last week and why Kirby Smart was asked about it and why he gave such a thorough, thoughtful response to it is we're coming up on a very important date as it relates to what's going to happen. And so I'll take a step back. And for those that have no clue what the hell we're talking about, and I say house settlement, and we're talking revenue share cap, like what that means, if you know the baseline of it, you can maybe fast forward 30 seconds or a minute here. But for people that are just totally out of the loop, like what are you talking about? College sports is entering a new world in terms of how you are able to manage your money. For the past few years, collectives have operated as a third party, and you have been able to create booster-backed agreements for players. And that is, created a little bit of discrepancy in terms of how schools are able to operate because not everybody has the same booster funding that everyone else has. And so they've tried to come up with a way for there to be some competitive balance in this. And so the house settlement is basic, just the nuts and bolts of it is basically going to make it so that there is a revenue share that all of these schools get allotted to them. We've talked about it in a previous episode. Year one, Georgia and most other schools in Georgia's realm are looking at about $20.5 million for the athletic department. As you can imagine, in Georgia's case, about 13, 14, 15 million of that is going to be used for football. The rest of that is going to be used for all of the other sports. Different schools and different conferences, they might have slightly different allotments dedicated to different sports. But we are trending towards a world where you have to operate under this spending cap. And April 7th, California judge Claudia Wilken, I believe is her name, is going to be making a ruling on whether this is approved. And what I will say is we think that she is getting closer to making an approval. It is possible there's going to be a long hearing that I'm not going to be watching every single second of what happens on April 7th, but there's going to be a long hearing with a lot of lawyers and a lot of student athletes that are maybe against it or for it that are going to be speaking around this settlement. And the judge is going to be either approving or not approving whether they move forward with the terms of the current settlement. She has already preliminarily approved it, but they have to go through this hearing process. Now, what I will say is, and Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports, wrote about this like within the last hour, it is quite possible that a final determination is not made on April 7th. It is possible that she hears everything from what goes on April 7th and then waits a few days or weeks to make a final determination on whether there is approval or not. The reason this is a big deal is because we're about to be entering two completely different worlds of how you are able to distribute money to these players. And there are different dates that are being worked off of. And I think maybe before I even get into some of the details of it all, Jordan, it might be best for us to just share what Kirby was asked about earlier this week and how he answered to that, because he was asked a relatively general question. I think it was our guy Connor Riley over at Dog Nation asked him a pretty general question about the house settlement and what he has shared with his players. And I don't know if you were expecting it or not, but Kirby gave a very in-depth, probably the most in-depth comment that any head coach in any sport has actually given on this topic publicly. So it might just be best, let's dive into what Kirby said about it. And then my brain's all over the place with this topic, so I have a lot of things that I'm going to want to lean into based on what he said. But let's just share what Kirby said first.
Yeah, that's up in the air. I'm not sure 100% that we have to get to 105 by fall count. As we understand it, it's going to be by the first game, which is a big difference. So we would be able to practice count like we want to. I think everybody's got to take a big pause right now and say deep breath, because of what's going on with basketball right now is crazy, and we don't know everything that's going to come out with April 7th, which might be April 7th. We might be the settlement date where we get a lot more information. But everybody's on pins and needles because we don't know exactly what's going to come out of this. What I do know is that we're going to continue to recruit people who love football, who are passionate about football, and that don't put money as the number one answer. I've never met a really good player that's all they cared about. So, the 105 number, the NIL number, what's the cap number, what is this going to be? There's stuff going on right now, guys, in college football. I mean, there's people reaching out to have a Zoom call and present all the players they represent that are on teams, including our teams. And they want to invite people to the Zoom so they can watch and see who's going in the portal or shopping who's in the portal before the portal. Do you want to get on the Zoom and look at all these players? I'm like, well, what if some of them are mine? I mean, it could be one of the most legendary, moments in all of college sports with what's coming up on this ruling and how people are going to try to manipulate a cap when all we're trying to do is make for competitive balance. And it's really unfortunate that I don't know if competitive balance is going to come out of it. I don't know if the kids win in this model that we currently have, if they win long term. Long term, when we have to cut sports and cut other things, are the kids going to be the winners of this? I don't know. College sports been around a long time and given many an opportunity. And by all means, I want these kids to make money. But what's going on right now is not good for anybody.
quick correction there, Ben. That was Brooks Austin from Sports Illustrated asked that one. Connor did ask a question a little bit later about the house settlement.
Okay, yeah. So shout out Brooks was asking about the 105, and then Kirby went into a little more detail about some of the things that went into that, and then I'll get into some of what Kirby shared from Connor's answer or question as well. But I'm just gonna go down, like, there is so much to unpack from what Kirby's talking about, and for a lot of people, this is kind of brand new, and like that, this is like sort of feels like it came out of left field that he's talking about this. But I mean, a part of it is, again, we're 4 days away from this hearing that is going to determine the future of college sports. And like Kirby Smart said, like, this is, he's not exaggerating, one of the most legendary moments in the history of college sports coming up with this ruling. Like, the future of college sports and what it looks like will be determined, in the next couple of weeks based on how this is. But I'm just going to kind of go through like the things that stood out to me from Kirby Smart's answers there. So one, probably the question was asked about the 105 and whether they will move, whether they're going to go from the 85 to the 105. And, Kirby Smart mentioned that he's not 100% that it has to be 105 by fall camp. He thinks it has to be by the first game. Honestly, probably not the most interesting stuff that came out of it, but it matters from a practicing standpoint and them not having to cut walk-ons by a certain date and things like that. Like, all of that does matter. But Kirby says, take the deep breath. And he says, what's going on with basketball is crazy. And, if you haven't been paying a lot of attention to this, you might be like, what's he talking about? But it just goes to show you, one, how much all these coaches talk. The fact that Kirby Smart is so in tune with the mayhem that's going on with college basketball recruiting right now. And I will call out that Ross Dellinger article from Yahoo Sports as well. He had Bruce Pearl quoted in his article talking about how it's crazy for basketball because they're trying to get these transfers signed, and Monday is the date that matters, and Monday is the national championship for college basketball. And so if you're Bruce Pearl or Kelvin Sampson or Todd Golden or John Shire, like, you're having to battle this absolute chaos in college basketball recruiting at the exact same time that you're trying to win a national championship. And so when Kirby Smart says it's crazy in college basketball right now, here's what's crazy. Here's what's going on. And we have a clip from Kirby Smart's one-on-one with Josh Pate where he gets into some of this as well. But just straight up, this is what's happening. July 1 is when revenue share deals go into effect. And July 1 is the date that this goes into effect. And on July 1, any deal, any payment that is made to a player after July 1 will be subject to counting towards your revenue share. So anybody that is making money, if you take guard transfer that Georgia just takes out of the portal in basketball, let's say he's making $200,000. I don't know what he's making. This is not me reporting what Georgia's paying this guy. Let's say he's making $200,000. That $200,000 will count if he's getting it paid after July 1, counts towards Georgia's revenue share budget that they have allotted for basketball. So anybody that's getting any kind of contract post July 1, whether that be right on July 1, whether that be agreements that are multi-year agreements that are going into effect year 2 or year 3 in their deals, all of that money will count towards what we are effectively referring to now as a salary cap. That's one part of this. The second part of this is starting July 1, any booster-backed agreements that you have that are coming through a collective that are name, image, and likeness deals, and I'm using air quotes for those that aren't watching on YouTube, those have been sketchy at best over the last few years in terms of what that actually means and, what is real marketing value versus what is, being created via your boosters and the money that you're able to raise. Starting July 1, that's not going to be possible anymore because there is going to be an NCAA clearinghouse that is going to be vetted by Deloitte. And I will not come anywhere close to being anywhere near smart enough to understand what processes are going in to how Deloitte determines what is a fair market value compensation deal and what is not. But anything that happens post July 1, they are going to be subject to that clearinghouse. And there's a lot of deals that have been created over the past 2-3 years that we don't expect to be cleared in the new world. And so what's happening? Kirby Smart said it on Tuesday. Everyone's trying to beat a date. Bruce Pearl said it in that article with Ross Dellinger. Everyone's in this beat the clock mode of get deals signed and agreed upon and paid out really before that July or the April 7th date, but especially before that July 1st date. So what's happening? You're hearing Kirby mentioned it, front loaded. There are contracts. This is just the way it is. I see Brandon Lawless says in the comment section, let's talk recruiting. Brandon, I hate to break it to you. This is recruiting. This is all that any college football coach, any college basketball coach in the world right now cares about when it comes to recruiting, because this is how you are going to get players in this moment in time, which is absolutely a bonkers world that we're living in. So what's happening? People are saying, hey, we'll give you $1 million right now to sign an agreement to be with us, and you are going to get that money front loaded. So you're not going to be making that post July 1, because we don't want that $1 million counting towards our revenue share cap, because we don't want to be using like if you're a football team and you've got a $15 million cap, you don't want to be paying a guy $1.5 million. That's 10% of your cap on one guy on a roster that's supposed to be 105. It is financially irresponsible to be paying that level of money to guys post July 1. So what's everyone doing? Well, they're trying to beat the clock. They're trying to beat a date. They want to get money in the hands of the guys that they want on campus before July 1 so they can get that figured out. So it is just a wild, wild time right now. Things are happening that have never happened before, quite frankly. If you are getting recruited over this stretch of time, like if you are a basketball transfer right now, there are no basketball transfers that will make more money than the guys that are getting that are transferring right now. Like that, right? This is the most lucrative opportunity for any college football or college basketball player, just because of how these teams are. And I'm not saying everyone's doing this, by the way, but there are teams that are front loading contracts to try and get guys into their classes. And this year, these recruiting classes are going to be the most expensive recruiting classes that anyone has had, because you are going to be doing almost a combination of booster-backed front-loading contracts as well as revenue share agreements that are going to be going into effect after July 1. Jordan, I'm sure that I'm sure I missed a ton there, but when you hear Kirby Smart talking about people manipulating the cap and things like this, like there is a reason why Kirby Smart sounds so anxious. You don't hear Kirby Smart sound, I don't want to say scared, if that's the right word, because this is a guy that is going to find a way to operate in any world that we live in. He's as smart as you're going to find as a head coach in college sports. But you can tell there are some anxious moments going on all around college sports, and especially at Georgia, not really knowing exactly what this is going to look like.
No, I mean, I think you nailed it, and you did a great job explaining it, because I think if I would have done it, I kind of would have looked like Charlie Kelly in It's Always Sunny, where he's got all the different, pieces of yarn connecting everything, because it is wild to explain. But yeah, I mean, what Kirby talked about there, with the front loading contracts, and I think it might be in his answer to Connor's question where he talked about, agents are going out there to try to get as much money as they can for their client right now. But Kirby said there's going to be a market correction. You're going to go get that guy that amount of money right now, but what in the world is that going to look like in year 2? So it's something that, everyone's trying to figure out on the fly. Ben, I don't know if you would agree with this. I still feel like a lot of this headache could have been avoided when NIL was implemented, had the NCAA put any guardrails down, but they didn't. They just said, yeah, you guys can do NIL deals. Just, it needs to be for guys on your campus, not necessarily high school recruits. Well, we saw how much that really, wound up being how everybody played, how everybody used NIL. So, no, I mean, it's a complicated subject, and it's something that, again, we're all just kind of waiting. And I think, honestly, I think that's the hardest part for a coach like Kirby Smart. We're waiting. We don't know for sure. And like you mentioned earlier, we may continue to wait. That date coming up is when people think we might get an answer, but we might have to wait even longer than that.
What's the next Kirby clip we got? We got the answer to Connor's question, I guess.
Don't have that one, but we do have him on Josh Pate show.
Well, hold up for a second on that, just because I know that one of the things that he talked about in his answer to Connor was the correction. Like the fascinating part about all this, and I talked about, like, this moment in time is the most lucrative that you can be getting recruited, because you basically can benefit from getting pre-July 1 money and post-July 1 revenue share money. And there's going to be a correction. Like, there are going to be guys that are making so much more money before they hit July 1 than they're going to be able to make post July 1. It's like, what does this mean for how it gets corrected and what it means for future years? And, it's all, like I said, it really is chaos. But I think that the key part of this is the beating the date, beating the clock. Like, Kirby Smart used that exact phrase, and Bruce Pearl in the article with Ross Dellinger used almost the exact same phrasing of, like, it's a race to beat a settlement ruling so that all of that money doesn't count in terms of what you have available under the revenue share cap. Let's share the clip. Kirby Smart sat down with our guy, shout out 24/7 Sports, Josh Pate. Great one-on-one interview, about 45 minutes long with Kirby. You can tell that even though Josh Pate slept through an interview with Kirby Smart, that Kirby Smart has a lot of respect for Josh Pate. So a lot of great insights in it. But for me, living in the recruiting world that I live in, the most fascinating part was when Josh asked him about revenue share. And Kirby Smart gets into a little bit about what the enforcement arm of that is going to look like and what that means.
Last year I was here, and we spoke about the fact that if you could have nothing more than just knowing who's going to be on your roster in the fall, that'd be great. That'd be a blessing. So now we're a year further down the road. We got a new horizon that's right here on us with Rev Share. How does that fundamentally impact Georgia?
The new Rev Share?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, 'cause I don't know exactly the way it's going to be dialed out in this settlement that's going to come from the court in California that's right up upon us here in April. We'll know a lot more after April. I think the biggest thing in college football that's about to happen is the interpretation of how teams are going to have money outside of cap. Okay, so there's going to be a clearinghouse, right? The clearinghouse is going to look at the deal, and they're going to judge, is this deal fair market value? That is the biggest entity.
Yeah.
That's the biggest misnomer out there on all of recruiting going on right now. The people say, well, the valuation, NIL, this is what this kid's valued at. Well, we're under a new market. We're under a new regime. We're going to be under Deloitte looking at deals and saying whether or not they're fair market value, and the policing of that is what's going to navigate the future of college football. Because if we're all at the same cap, there's not going to be a lot of problems. But it's who gets money above the cap. How are you manipulating that money above the cap? And can it be manipulated, or will it be truly scrutinized the same way? And what the intent of NIL was to make legitimate deals, will that follow? Will somebody get penalized who tries to stretch it? And what is that penalty? Everybody's going to be watching in the next 365 days to see what happens, because it will determine college football's future on how they navigate and police this.
Whew. I mean, this is like loaded stuff. Like, this is, I can only imagine if I'm making $10 million plus a year, and I feel like I, have full control over my football program. And I don't think it would be me stepping out of line to say that Kirby Smart's a little bit of a control freak. He likes to have, his hands on everything. And this is one of the few times where I think that all of these college coaches that are in similar shoes to Kirby, a lot of this is out of their control. Like, they don't know how exactly this is going to be ruled. They don't know how this is going to be policed. I mean, we've talked about it on that February episode when we were talking about how NIL is going to break down for Georgia. And we talked about this above the cap concept, right? Like, if Georgia's got, somewhere between $13 and $15 million of the revenue share for football, well, Georgia feels like, and most of these schools feel like, 20 to 25 million is what it requires to win a national championship. And so that's 7 million, 8 million, 10 million. We'll see what it ends up being. Money that these schools are going to have to try and find agreements above the cap to fund their roster. And so what does above the cap mean? Well, it probably depends on how it ends up being interpreted. It probably means different things to different people. There are probably programs around the country, I'm not even going to name them because I don't even know exactly which ones they are, that are going to try and find creative ways to circumvent what exactly that means. And so I think what Kirby Smart doesn't know and what many people don't know is, what does a Deloitte-backed clearinghouse look like? How is that policed? What are they measuring to determine whether an agreement is fair? If a quarterback at, I don't want to say a specific school name. If a quarterback at school X gets this, gets $1.5 million agreement with this tiny little sandwich shop in their college town, is Deloitte going to consider that a real deal? Or is this something where they are trying to manufacture fake money essentially to be able to get the roster put together that they want? Or is it going to be done the way that I think name, image, and likeness was intended, where, hey, you're one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the country, and Delta wants you to do commercials, or Gatorade does a commercial with Malachi Starks. Like, those are actually being operated, and they're being negotiated the same way that an NFL player who does a deal with Gatorade or Nike or whatever company it ends up being. I think college football coaches are hopeful, and maybe naively hopeful, that everyone is going to approach this the way that it's supposed to be approached, and that this clearinghouse is going to penalize or permit things the way that they should be intended to be done. And I think that's what everyone's watching. If no one's being penalized for basically creating a booster back deal that gets their quarterback an extra $1 million above the cap, well, then you know what's going to happen? Everyone's going to start behaving that way, and everyone's going to be doing that. And everything that we're talking about with this house settlement is pointless and all for naught, because everyone's just going to be breaking all of these I don't want to say breaking rules or doing anything illegal, because like Kirby Smart even said it, like, it's not anything illegal necessarily be happening, but people are trying to find ways to manipulate it. And so I think that is the ultimate part of all of this, is what ends up being permitted and what ends up being penalized, and how much does that clearinghouse actually make these marketing deals required to be real and not basically bogus pay for play.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to me, the most interesting piece is the NIL and how the clearinghouse will work, because as you just laid out, there have been like the Malachi Starks doing a commercial for Delta. It boils down to, are the deals made in good faith? And I think that the coaches want to go into this hoping that everyone plays by those rules, but somebody's going to step out of line. I don't know who that is, and I'm not sitting here with a name in mind and saying, well, I know who it'll be. Someone is going to do something that toes the line, that is going to, show us how the clearinghouse is going to act. I don't think this is going to be a smooth ride, and fascinated to see, like Kirby said, over the next 365 days, are there examples that come out of the clearinghouse saying, okay, no, this is a fraudulent deal. We're pointing to this, and what that means for that team. Is the player in question suspended? Do they have like a financial fine? What exactly does that mean? But on a funnier side, I hope Deloitte's ready for college football fans, because, there's going to be people tracking down who's involved in this. Hey, the head of this, he went to Texas. Are you serious? It is going to be unreal once this thing gets underway.
Yeah, it really is crazy. And I'll say this, like, obviously we've talked for a half hour on this show already about it. I wouldn't be talking about it for a half hour to start the show if I didn't think this was the sole focus of everyone in college athletics right now. Like, this is determining what the future of recruiting looks like and talent acquisition. And that's the fundamental basis of what we want this show to be, is talking about retaining talent and acquiring talent and all of that. And this will dictate what that looks like in the future. To Kirby Smart's point, we don't 100% know what that's going to look like, but the way that this plays out, how it's interpreted, how it's policed will 100%. Like, if people are worried about what college sports are becoming, you actually should like that this settlement is becoming, because I think it is going to create some competitive balance, but that is only going to be the case if it is policed or penalized the correct way.
To your point about it mattering, I think you just listened to what Kirby said both during Tuesday's press conference and with Josh Pate, like what all he had to say and how long he talked on the subject. I mean, it matters a lot because they understand that it's sort of the path forward for all of college athletics. And I would point out too, this is a football recruiting show, but I mean, men's basketball is in the eye of the storm right now with it being the off season. I mean, it matters a lot, and I think it is worth taking the time to sort of break it down and explain what it means and what we're all waiting to see next.
I mean, Bruce Pearl said it in Ross Dellinger's article. Like, he's spending 90% of his time focused on the Final Four right now and 10% of his time focused on rev share, the house settlement, and recruiting. The fact that a college coach is even coming out and acknowledging that 100% of his time is not being devoted to winning a national championship. He's got 2 games left to win. This is the second Final Four Auburn's ever been in. And Bruce Pearl is as honest as it gets when it comes to explaining the state of college sports and where things are at. The fact he even acknowledges that just tells you how ridiculous it is. And I'm in the college football recruiting world more than the basketball recruiting world. I don't think I fully appreciated until Kirby Smart said the way he said it, his little Southern, as Bainbridge came out, he's like, it is crazy talking about college basketball. I don't think I realized just how madness college basketball is right now, because they can actually sign these players right now. Whereas football, you're almost having to take a little bit of a leap of faith where you're brokering these agreements with guys that don't technically have to sign with you until December, which makes it a little bit more complicated on the football side of things.
And I won't bore people who are here to listen to football to dive totally into college basketball. It could be its own podcast. It really could. But just keep in mind this nugget of there are a lot of high major college basketball programs that do not have football teams, which that means they're going to get more rev share, which means they, in theory, should be able to spend more on guys. So that's an interesting element to the basketball side of it is, your Villanovas and your St. John's, they're fighting with the likes of like Kentucky and Auburn, as you mentioned. And in theory, they should have a little bit more as far as the rev share goes with what they can go out and get guys with.
I will give this parting note on this topic. I'm sure that there are people that are more in the legal space than we are that are listening to this, people that I'm sure are maybe administrators or involved in the recruiting of some of these things. Like, I'm sure that I spoke out of turn a time or two. I'm trying to learn on the fly with a lot of these things, but I'm all ears as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me offline about this and educate me on anything that you feel like I lapsed on, I am all ears, because I do think it is a complicated subject that, let's be real about it. Brandon Lawless, he said it right there. People care about recruiting. This has probably gotten a little too legalese for people that just want to know which players are going to be ending up signing with Georgia, and I totally get that. But this is the world that we live in, and I think communicating as best as I can what it means and how it is going to impact what Georgia roster acquisition looks like moving forward is really important. So I'm all ears to learn more, because I'm sure I said a couple stupid things, probably more than just a couple stupid things here or there throughout the course of that 30-minute spiel.
No, I think you did great. And again, I think it's important for fans to educate themselves, because it is going to look very different going forward.
All right, Brandon Lawless, you've basically become the third co-host of the show with your comments. You can read about that in the paper. We'll put that behind us. let's focus on what the Brandon Lawlesses of the world want to focus on, and that is who's going to be playing quarterback for Georgia in the future. And while I was away, I got a much needed, very rare spring practice break. So I appreciate you for holding the fort down. I don't think anything burned down while I was away. Most people probably didn't even notice I was gone. But I appreciate you. While I was away, though, some very important news came out on the Georgia recruiting front, and that was 5-star quarterback, once committed to Georgia, now down to a final 2 of Georgia and Oregon, Jared Curtis, announced his commitment date of May 5th. And I think there was some teasing. Is it going to be a commitment? Is it going to be a commitment date? We now know, basically 1 month from us being live recording this right now, Jared Curtis will have a decision between Georgia and Oregon. And this probably will not be the last time we talk about what's going to go down with Jared Curtis, because the last time we were on here, we were talking about what's going down with Jared Curtis. And I think this is one of those things that is constantly in flux. And so what do we know as we sit here? Well, what we know is he is down to a final 2. It is Georgia or it is Oregon. It is going to be one of those 2 programs. We know that he is very likely to take visits to both of those schools between now and May 5th. I have been tentatively told that to keep an eye out for Jared Curtis at G-Day on April 12th. What that date looks like for Oregon, I'm not entirely sure, but I am leaning towards expecting to see him on both campuses between now and May 5th. Why May 5th? Well, we just talked about NIL for 30 minutes. Let's be real. There's a lot when you're a quarterback. All of these quarterbacks that we're talking about in the 2026 recruiting class are going to be demanding life-changing money. They are going to be the highest paid people in the sport, well, besides the head coaches. And Jared will be making a pretty penny because he deserves that, and he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And so he's well-repped. His agents are going to be having conversations with both sides about this, and a lot of that needs to figure itself out over the next few weeks. And so that gives Georgia a month. It gives Oregon a month. It gives all of Jared Curtis's representatives and his decision-making team a month to figure out what is everyone's offer, what are the pros and cons of both schools. I don't want to sit here. I mean, Kirby Smart said it in his spiel. They're not recruiting people that only care about money. Like, if this is going to be a 100% highest bidder gets the win, you're not going to find Georgia involved in many of those recruitments, especially though one like Jared Curtis's, that it's so important that you get the right quarterback in this recruiting class. Relationships, fit on campus, the offense, skill players that you're planning on bringing in, like all of the old school recruiting tactics are still heavily involved in this. And I don't think that the number between Georgia and Oregon is going to be drastically different enough for that to be the one singular factor that determines this recruitment. Now, is it going to be an important factor? No questions asked. It would be stupid and naive of me not to acknowledge that. But what we know is Georgia is going to be waiting until May 5th. I'm not saying they've put all of their eggs in the Jared Curtis basket. We'll get into, what that means, but they are giving Jared Curtis first choice. This is not different than anything that we talked about on the last episode. Jared Curtis he is their number 1 quarterback on their board. He is the guy that they have prioritized. He is the guy that was once committed to them. Until Jared Curtis lets Georgia know, yes, it's Georgia, or no, it's Oregon, Georgia will not be 100% moving forward with a green light for another quarterback to commit. What that does not mean is that Georgia is not recruiting other quarterbacks. Georgia is recruiting other quarterbacks. They are just being transparent in how they are recruiting them and what they are relaying to them about Jared Curtis and Jared Curtis's commitment date. So I know what everyone's going to be wondering. Is Jared Curtis committing to Georgia on May 5th? I don't even want to sit here on April 3rd with an answer one way or the other. I've gone back and forth. I'm going to have, at the end of spring, I'm going to have my next mock class come out. And I have had the internal debate for the last 3 weeks, based on my conversation with sources, where I think this one is trending. And I've had moments where I felt like Georgia was maybe favored. I've had moments where I felt like Oregon was maybe favored. Hell, if I'm just being totally honest with you, at this exact point, I'd probably lean Oregon. over Georgia at this exact moment. But again, there's still visits to be had. There's still negotiations to be done. And it is impossible to say one way or the other. Before I get into what this means and, other quarterbacks that Georgia's recruiting and where I think Georgia would turn, Jordan, what do you think? Jared Curtis, May 5th. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I think it backs up the point you just made about not really being able to say. Think about the last time we recorded. I guess this was 2 weeks ago. I think we felt pretty good about where Georgia was with Jared Curtis. I put Jared Curtis as my predicted commit, and now it kind of sounds like Oregon's getting back in it and making this thing interesting. And I say that to say, buckle up. This may change, 2-3 different times in the next month's time. So if I'm a Georgia fan, don't get too caught up on what we're saying right now, even next week. I mean, this thing is going to go all the way to May 5th. I feel pretty confident. And, I think Georgia's going to put its best foot forward with Jared Curtis and show him what it would mean for him to be a Bulldog. And him and his family and his reps are going to have to sit down and weigh what that looks like compared to the opportunity at Oregon. And they're going to have to make a decision ahead of May 5th and then ride with whatever they decide.
Well, to your point, the last time we were talking about this, I think optimism was maybe a little bit higher than it was when we sit right now. Not to say that it's full on pessimism. I just think that he had just come off a Georgia visit. I think that he had a lot of constructive conversations on the NIL front in film sessions with Georgia coaches. I think there was a lot of reason for positive buzz coming off of that. I think the May 5th date scared a lot of people, probably on both sides. I've heard this from the Oregon side as well. I think it just made everyone realize there's still another month of negotiating and figuring all of this out that's going to have to happen before they have a final answer and determination. I think that timeline probably raises the blood pressure a little bit because it does change the way that you're able to recruit these other guys. If Jared Curtis had committed already, you can already pivot, and what you're able to tell other quarterbacks that you're recruiting changes entirely. And so, I think that we're having to talk about these two things in tandem because Georgia is going to get a quarterback in this 2026 class. They really can't afford to not take one, I don't think, even though they might do the transfer portal in December regardless. I think that they've got to take a 2026 quarterback. And so this isn't an Arch Manning situation where you can wait until June. And if you lose out on him to Texas, well, we'll just push things off to next cycle and we'll try and take two or figure it out. Georgia needs to try and figure out a 2026 quarterback. And so you got to have the conversation. What's going to happen on May 5th? What do we think is going to happen with Jared Curtis? But also, if not Jared Curtis, then who? Because it's going to need to be someone. And I think, we've mentioned a lot of names on this show and, at Dogs 24/7, Landon Duckworth, Dia Bell, Jonas Williams, Jaden O'Neal's a guy that's visited. A guy in state, Brody McWhorter, that's maybe a little bit further down the board, but someone that Georgia is recruiting and has always liked, and I think is trying to keep warm as well. A lot of that is going on. But the name that has been coming up more and more is Bo Bentley. And how I feel about Bo Bentley. I saw him in San Antonio, and I think the world of him as a prospect, as a culture fit, honestly, in terms of, how he fits in Athens. And, he took a multi-day trip to Georgia. And I think that he really impressed a lot of people in the building. I think, when he goes up there and does board work, what he knows from an X's and O's standpoint speaks for itself. I think the way that he carries himself and just guys gravitate towards him, I think there's a lot of Gunnar Stockton-like qualities there in terms of how much the people around him just enjoy being around him. He's a state champion in 4A or 4D1 Texas classifications are above my pay grade, so I can't quite figure him out. But a state champion in the state of Texas. There are a lot of football reasons to love Bo Bentley. And because of that, we've gotten a lot of this reaction on our board. Why not just move forward with Bo Bentley? Why not just try and, get him, make him your number one guy and just go get him? A lot of people say, screw Jared Curtis. Let's just go get Bo Bentley. Let's live in the real world, guys. Georgia has recruited Jared Curtis for a long, long time. They are in the final two, and he has a commitment date that's 1 month out. Georgia is going to go to the end with Jared Curtis, as they should, given what he brings as a player, the relationships that they have with him, and his caliber of recruit that he is. Like, it should not be like, don't even waste your time with the scrap the Jared Curtis situation and let's just move on to another quarterback, because it's not happening. Okay, so let's just live in the real world. Jared Curtis is who Georgia is going to prioritize first. Now, there is a world where Jared Curtis does not commit to Georgia on May 5th. He commits to Oregon, a very realistic world. And if that happens, I think the reason why a lot of folks say, let's just pivot to Bo Bentley right now, is because they're worried that come May 5th, well, Bo Bentley's not going to have felt as wanted at Georgia, and that other schools might have prioritized him more, and then it might be too little too late. Now, I don't quite think of it the same way. You know, I use Ryan Montgomery as an example last recruiting cycle. Georgia, the number one guy on their board was Matt Zollers. They wanted Matt Zollers. They were not going to let anybody make a decision. That included Julian Lewis. That included Ryan Montgomery, until Matt Zollers makes his decision. Matt Zollers makes his decision. Within a week, Ryan Montgomery has had a conversation with Georgia where Georgia has told him he has the green light. And within 3 days, he is committed in Georgia's class. If you had been paying attention to that beforehand and viewing it the exact same way, you'd been like, oh man, are we going to run, if we don't get Matt Zollers, are we going to run Ryan Montgomery off? Like, these are the things that people would have been saying. Well, maybe so. Are there examples of guys that you would run off because you didn't say, hey, you're our number one guy and you have the decision? 100%. Are those the type of guys that I think that Georgia is recruiting or that they are desperately wanting in their class? No, I don't. And so, you know, you remember Ryan Montgomery, he wanted to commit the October before. He wanted to commit in January. He wanted to commit in February. Well, what became crystal clear after the fact was Ryan Montgomery was going to adjust his timeline for whatever Georgia was willing to let him do. I was told at one point, you know, during last recruiting cycle, that it felt at times like Ryan Montgomery and his family were recruiting Georgia as much as Georgia was recruiting them. And I think that that put Georgia in a little bit of a, you know, position of power and knowledge to know, okay, we can handle this recruitment this way. Ryan Montgomery got to a point where he was like, you know what, I think I'd rather commit sooner. But at the time it was like, okay, well, it's going to be Florida or South Carolina if it's happening then, because Georgia's waiting on Matt Zollers. And then it was like, oh, maybe I'll wait until the summer to make a decision. But then what happens when Georgia says you have the green light? 48 hours. Ryan Montgomery is a Georgia Bulldog. And so to think that Georgia doesn't have the ability to manipulate some of these timelines or to have real conversations with these quarterbacks is just misguided. Like, I think everyone thinks that we live in this world where everyone's feelings are hurt all the time and that Bo Bentley must be sitting there, oh, LSU, you know, just to throw the Bo Bentley stuff out there more. He just announces this past week he's got a final 3, Georgia, LSU, and Oklahoma. He's got official visits scheduled to all 3 of them. I think the order is Georgia, Oklahoma, and LSU of the 3 official visits, but Georgia is the first one. Here's my thoughts on it. And this is me kind of unscripted here. If Bo Bentley is so concerned about whether he is the number one option at Georgia or not, and he feels that he is at LSU, and LSU has communicated to him, like, you are our number one guy and you're the top option. And Oklahoma's got a guy committed already and they're still trying to get Bo Bentley. If he feels more prioritized at LSU and that matters to him so desperately, why would he wait until after May 5th to make a decision? Now, this is not me talking with any knowledge of saying Bo Bentley is waiting on Georgia and that if Georgia says you've got the green light right after May 5th, that he's immediately going to commit to Georgia. I don't think it is that easy for Georgia. Like, I do think there is a world where Georgia doesn't sign either Jared Curtis or Bo Bentley because LSU has made him a top guy. LSU did lose Bryce Underwood in the 2025 recruiting class, and they are going to be very desperate at quarterback. But to me, if Bo Bentley is willing to wait until after May 5th to make a decision, it means that he's not too beat up over the fact that he might not be Georgia's number one option. It means that he is willing to hear them out if Georgia gets the wrong answer from Jared Curtis. Now, if Jared Curtis commits to Georgia on May 5th, Bo Bentley knows as well as anyone he's going to LSU or Oklahoma, one of those two. Like, that's just the way that it's going to be. But I believe at this point in time that if Georgia does not get Jared Curtis on May 5th, Bo Bentley will be who they pivot to and make this serious push for. Now, again, do I think that it's a guarantee that Georgia gets him? No. But I think that it is telling that he is willing to seemingly wait until after May 5th, have his official visit set up, and come back to the drawing board with those conversations with Georgia and with LSU and with Oklahoma when that time comes. I will also add there is financial benefit to Bo Bentley waiting here. If Jared Curtis commits to Oregon, Georgia's going to have a lot of money freed up that they were going to be giving to Jared Curtis. It's now going to be available. And Bo Bentley might be the next most coveted quarterback in the country that's on the board right now for not just at Georgia, at LSU, at Oklahoma. And so I think the price for Bo Bentley goes up after May 5th as well. So I think him waiting and being patient, it just behooves everyone. And so again, I know what everyone sitting here wants to hear is, who's Georgia signing at quarterback? Is it going to be Jared Curtis? Is it going to be Bo Bentley? What are the chances with each? It is really impossible to say that at this point in time. But I think that if we're talking about how Georgia is going to approach this, that's how it's going to be approached. Wait till May 5th, get a good answer on Jared Curtis. That's that. You figured it out. Quarterback's done. Now you can turn your attention to every other position group. If not, anxiety heightens in Athens because they realize it's not a gimme slam dunk that you're going to get Bo Bentley. But I think that Bentley and the people that are helping him make his decision are much more receptive to how Georgia is handling this than maybe a lot of emotional message board folks are giving Georgia and Bo Bentley and his representatives credit for.
No, I think you nailed it. I wanted to mention Bo Bentley, 4A D1 state champ. So I think you got pretty close when you were talking about that. And another example that I thought of, it's not really one-to-one, but I think it's still worth repeating with quarterbacks, is Ryan Puglisi. He commits in, I want to say that was October 2022, and then Georgia goes after Dylan Raiola, and, he sticks with his commitment. He doesn't, Georgia wanted to bring in 2 quarterbacks in that class, and the pursuit of another quarterback did not cause Ryan Puglisi to say, I don't know about this. I don't really like that they're talking to this other quarterback. So I think that's more common than fans sometimes want to let on. That I think they get in their head, well, this guy has to feel like the guy, and if not, he's going to say, screw you, and I'm going to go somewhere else. These kids understand, what's happening here, and especially at the quarterback position, they understand, that teams are going to take their time and try to get the guys they want. And I think that, those quarterbacks understand, even if they're not the top guy on the board, to be offered, is still an opportunity to play at Georgia, and still an opportunity to maybe go there and wind up winning the quarterback job. And to me, when we look at this, and Bo Bentley, I'm with you, Ben. It seems like he is the next guy up if it's not Jared Curtis. And I would say this now, and I would definitely want to do it now, knowing Jared Curtis could wind up picking Georgia, because I always hate, when we say we get to that commitment date and he picks Oregon, and we go on a podcast and we say, that's not that big a deal, because it just sounds like sour grapes to me. Georgia wants Jared Curtis. Georgia would be ecstatic and would feel great about winning that recruitment. I don't want to make it sound like I don't think that's the case, but I do want to say, if that recruitment does not go Georgia's way, but they get Bo Bentley, I still think Georgia's in really good shape. I think if they get one of those 2 quarterbacks, I know that, I can already kind of see in my mind the message board on May 5th. If Jared Curtis picks Oregon, people are going to be upset, and I understand that. But I think Georgia will be in fine shape if that happens and they get Bo Bentley. They get one of those 2 guys in the 2026 class. I think there's plenty of reason for Georgia fans to be excited.
Completely agree. And I think that's probably part of the reason why the reaction has been like, just go get Bo Bentley right now. But I don't think it's as simple as that. Like, you can't just go get him right now. Like, I think that once May 5th happens, it will change that recruitment as well and what goes into the conversations related to that recruitment. I think what's important for Georgia is they have established a good enough relationship through all of the Jared Curtis recruitment to still be one of the three in the mix for Bo Bentley. I mean, you got to remember, he didn't have an offer a couple months ago. And he had a whole spring practice visit schedule that did not have Georgia included on that because he didn't have the offer yet. He gets the offer from Georgia. He swings in a multi-day visit to Georgia. Now Georgia's one of the final three and has an official visit set. Like, Georgia has done a miraculous job here to navigate, because it's not like, I get it, I'm probably downplaying some of the emotion or ego or pride that goes into some of this, but it is not an easy conversation to have. And Georgia has proven in the past their ability to do it. And quite frankly, it's only more delicate because it's the quarterback position. Like, we see conversations like this all the time at linebacker or running back or receiver where guys they are not takes, or they don't have the green light to commit somewhere until someone else on the board chooses another school. These types of things these are conversations that happen in recruitment daily at every single position group. It's just more of a focus when it's the quarterback because you generally are only taking one. All right. That was a lot. I knew this was going to be a loaded show. I knew that I was going to be out of breath by the time that we got to the Zech Fort interview, but I am excited for everyone to take a step back from some of the news and, intel that's going on with things for a great interview with Georgia commit Zech Fort from IMG Academy. He's going to be a vocal leader on the field for this class. I mentioned it in articles that I've written about him and in my interview with him. He's going to go down as the first ever 4-year captain at IMG Academy, which I think tells you a ton about who he is and how he's respected by his teammates and his coaches. So I think that is going to be an awesome interview. Before we get into that, I do highly recommend a Dogs 24/7 subscription. If you subscribe to Dogs 24/7, you get access to everything that I write about recruiting, about the team, what Jordan writes about football, basketball, a lot going on with basketball transfer portal right now, everything that's going on the message boards, you can read everything that's going on our sister sites at other schools and get insights from how things are feeling at other programs, as well as our great national team that we have as well. Please like and subscribe the YouTube channel. If you're like our guy Brandon Lawless in the comment section and you love the show, please like and subscribe the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please like or subscribe in those channels as well. Also, just follow us on social media as well. So, we're going to try and hit all the platforms at Jordan Davis Hill on Twitter, at Benjamin Wolk on Twitter, and then my tiny little Instagram following that I have that I'm trying to, be better about, at Stay Wolk 24/7. We don't always do these shows live. Sometimes we pre-record them, but because this will be live, I'll be sitting here during the Zech Fort interview. So if anyone in the comment section on YouTube has any questions about anything that we've covered related to the house settlement, related to Jared Curtis or quarterback recruiting, feel free to drop that in the comment section during the Zech Fort interview, and I can try to respond to those things as well. And I might even answer one or two of them coming out of the break after the interview as well. Welcome into the show, a very, very special guest. It is 5'11", 195 pounds. Did I get those measurables right?
Yeah, yes, sir, you did.
IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, Georgia 4-star safety commit, top 100 player in the country, Zech Fort. Thank you for joining the show.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for having me.
Technically, I guess I should say you're a returning guest because you might not even be aware of this, but we had a conversation when you were committing, and I used some of the audio on the end of the show to sort of explain, introduce you to Georgia fans. So I guess I'll start there. How does it feel to be one of the first returning guests that we've had on the show?
It's definitely a blessing being a part of this whole thing. Being a part of the Georgia Bulldog community is such an honor. So, yeah, it's definitely a blessing.
Being part of the Georgia community is probably the honor. Being a returning guest on the show, you don't have to blow smoke out of my ass like that's some kind of special honor or anything like that. That's okay.
But
Since we started on the less serious side, I guess we'll stay there for a second. And I know, your full first name is Zechariah. I know you go by Zech to most people. I can kind of identify with that. I'm a Benjamin. That's a shortenable biblical name to Ben as well. I'm sure there's some people in your world that get to call you Zechariah. Who has those privileges? Is it just angry mom or something? Or is there others that get to call you Zechariah?
it's really only my mom, my dad, my aunts, and my uncles, my cousins, and my brother, but that's it. Nobody else.
Really family. So like teammates, coaches, they're Zech.
Yeah, they like try to call me that sometimes, a troll, but it's just Zach. So yeah, that's it.
I feel that because I feel, I go by Benjamin sometimes. I even have it listed on here for those watching on YouTube, but really is like my mom's pissed at me about something.
Yeah.
That's when I'm going to catch a Benjamin.
Definitely.
All right. So I do want to, I promise this whole interview is not just going to be the stupidest list of questions that you've ever gotten. So I do want to get on the more, serious side of things around Georgia, around your recruitment. Obviously you're down at IMG Academy, which I think there's a lot to dig into is there, but I want to start with you in Georgia. And, you committed publicly on January 30th. And I know things happen behind the scenes before you're actually coming out publicly and committing. But that same day that you committed, you were having Dante Williams in home for your in-home visit during the contact period. Like, what was that experience like, getting to actually put the word out there, like, I'm committing to Georgia, and also having your Georgia position coach coming in-house with you at the same time?
Yeah, it was definitely just a great experience, meet with Coach Dante. He recruited me while he was at USC, so we had that long relationship. And when I visited Georgia, when they played against Tennessee, like, it was different than anything I've ever felt at any other school. And, what Coach Smart has done with the program, Georgia represents everything I stand for. So why not be a part of that?
Yeah, so I want to go back there. Like, obviously, January 30th is when the world became aware. But as you mentioned there, like, you'd been on a visit to Tennessee. You obviously build relationships with these coaches for months and years prior to you making a decision like this. Like, let's go back to the beginning. Like, what was the story with you and George? Like, I don't even know if I fully appreciate when it all started with you and George. Like, take us back to the beginning of it.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir. So, actually that day it was Coach T-Rob and Coach Dante that came to our spring practice, because, we had the in-house visit later on. So, I met with those guys after our practice and talked to them for a good hour. And my family was around too. So, we just getting that connection up, building a relationship, and they told me how much they value me at the University of Georgia, and they're proud to get me because they already knew I had committed. So, it was just, that was in the morning, and then I committed later on around 4 or 5 o'clock. So, it was just,
So I know it's like when you tell the world is generally different than when you tell the coaches that you're planning to play for. Like, when did Dante and T-Rob know that you were going to be a Georgia Bulldog?
Oh, yeah, they knew like a month before. Like,
okay.
But I pretty much already had my mind made up after the game. Like, when I went to the hotel room, and me and my mom and my dad, we just like sat down and we were just like, Georgia's the spot. And then I had told my trainer, Mike Evans from Long Beach, too, because he's involved with that. But yeah, it was really after the Georgia versus Tennessee game that like I had my mind made up. I knew I wanted to be Georgia Bulldog. So
cool. So I wanted to ask you about that Tennessee game because you've mentioned that to me before. Like, really, it was that Tennessee game that was the turning point for Georgia, for you realizing that that's where you wanted to be. And I don't know how well you've gotten to know Lincoln Keys, who's the tight end from Michigan, but he committed like the day after that Tennessee game. And he said the same thing. Like, once he was in that environment, he really started to know. What went into that experience, that game weekend, or during your time in Sanford Stadium for that game that really reinforced to you that Georgia was where you were trending toward?
What really did it was, I heard a lot of talk about, Georgia, like if they lost this game, then they wouldn't be able to be in the playoffs. And that just really shows you like what Georgia's really about. Because like when times get when times get tough, that's when Georgia really flourishes the most. So that's what like really came to my mind, through the game. Like adversity struck and they prevailed. So that's definitely like what hit me the most.
What was your favorite moment in that game? Like, I think a lot of people listening to this, they're going to be able to relate to this. Like, they have their moments in Sanford, and if they've grown up lifelong fans or whatever, like they got the hair sticks up on their arms when certain moments happen. Like, what was the moment for you during that game where you were like, you know what, I'm really feeling this atmosphere?
Just every time it was third down and the crowd's going crazy and the defense makes a stop, like that's what I live for. So, there's a bunch of moments, especially before the game too. It was a blackout, so like it was just crazy energy. Like, you can't describe it. It's just a feeling. And that's what I felt at Georgia.
If I remember correctly, I think that was the first game they had the fireworks that were going off. Were the fireworks going off in the stadium at that time?
I'm not really sure, but
I can't even remember. They just launched like doing the fireworks on game days, and I feel like that was the first game. Someone listening to this is going to be so mad at me that I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I feel like that might have been the first game they did it.
It was just crazy.
Cool. So how many times have you been back since that visit? Have you been back since?
No, I'm going back next week.
So it's going to be for a couple days, and for G Day. I mean, what are you looking forward to getting back at being your first time back in Athens as a Georgia commit?
I'm just looking forward to being around the guys, being around the coaching staff, seeing the campus, just seeing everything, Just want to see guys competing during the game and just have a good time.
This is a little bit of a weird question. I'm sure everybody has different answers for this, but I mean, there are different types of visits to go on. There's game visits, there's practice visits, scrimmage visits, could be junior days, summer camps, like whatever it might be. Obviously, you haven't gotten to get into official visit season yet to know what official visits are exactly like. But to you, what is the type of visit that resonates with you most as a recruit?
I would definitely say the game day visits, because like that's what people show up for. They show up to watch football. So, best way to, know like what you're going to get out of school is watch them play football on Saturday. So, yes, sir.
I know we've already talked about Coach Dante and T-Rob. I guess T-Rob would have been recruiting you when he was still at Alabama, probably.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then Dante, I'm sure you all go way back from his West Coast ties. But give people some insights into those two position coaches. Obviously, both of them, teaming up in the defensive backfield as secondary coaches. Like, what do you know and what have you learned about them through this experience that helped make you comfortable with wanting to play for them?
Definitely just knowing up, their journey and how they got into, coaching and where they're from, and just that long lasting relationship from the previous schools they were at. They've still recruited me now at Georgia. That's definitely the big thing for me, because coaches bounce around and sometimes they stop, but they never stop. So that definitely showed me like how much they value me and what great people they are.
How long have you known those guys?
Yeah, I've known Coach T-Rob since my freshman year, and I've known Coach Dante before that. Being in the West Coast, being around the LA area, so yes, sir.
Do you remember like when they got to Georgia, like your first interactions with them, and like I'm sure it's an interesting conversation. Like you've known them with a different logo on their chest, and then they get to Georgia. Like, do you remember what their initial Georgia message was to you?
I remember Coach Dante's initial message was, he just was like letting me know that like they're gonna be on me, and it doesn't stop. And then I remember Coach T-Rob. It wasn't really like he didn't really say anything, but when I went to the Georgia versus Alabama game at Alabama, I was on the sideline, and this was like during the warm-ups, and I saw Coach T-Rob on the other side, and he just gave me a look, and he started smiling. So yeah, that was pretty funny to me because, you know, he knew what this was. So yeah, yes, sir.
That's funny. What about Kirby Smart? I mean, I know obviously he's a defensive back guy. Do you have any good Kirby Smart recruiting story that helped get you to Georgia?
No, yeah, I just remember, like, you know, having conversation with Coach Smart and my family before they played the game versus Tennessee, and he was just so welcoming to me and my family, and you know, yeah, he's just a great guy, and we had great conversation. And then I remember when I had committed, I told Coach Smart, like, in person when he came down to IMG, and I think I told him in front of the other coaching staff, so the other coaches from like all the other colleges. So yeah, that was pretty funny. But yeah, I just wanted to let him know that I was going to be a Georgia Bulldog. So yes,
That's
sir.
funny. That's a great story. All right, so I wanted to ask you for a self scout to give people an idea of what kind of player you're going to be bringing to Georgia. And I know we've talked about this some. I got a chance, and I appreciate you for connecting me with Aubrey Kidd, your DB coach over there at IMG. And I've learned a lot about the buzzwords that I always hear: field general, physical, cerebral, willing tackler. But I want you to start just as a player. We can get into the leadership side of things here in a second because I find that part to be fascinating as well. But if you're an NFL GM breaking down your game on the field, like, what do you bring in when you turn on the film?
Yeah, I bring versatility, physicality, intensity, and just aggressiveness. But I'm also very fluid. I'm a playmaker. I'm going to make plays in the air, on the ground. I just make plays. That's really, and then I'm like Coach Kidd said, I'm a field general. I take pride in knowing what's going on and knowing what's about to happen, based on like offensive formations, how the receivers are lining up, reading tackles, reading guards, reading the quarterback, reading tendencies like that. That stuff I pay attention to. So yeah, that just all feeds into my physical abilities.
Are you thinking safety, star? Have you guys figured that out, what that's going to look like yet?
Yeah, definitely. Coach T-Rob and Coach Dante, they've told me they want me to be very versatile, playing star and safety. So, yeah, yes, sir.
When you're watching, whether it be college guys or NFL guys, like when you're throwing on film and doing your own study of other guys that do it, like who are the people that you like to turn the tape on for and draw inspiration from?
Definitely Javon Bullard, Brian Branch, Antoine Winfield, Derwin James, Mika Fitzpatrick, Tyrann Matthew, those guys.
I know people are going to, when they hear the Javon Bullard comment there to start, I know a lot of people listening to this are going to light up on that one because I've heard many comparisons when you throw on your film and you throw on Javon's. But what was it about his game, or do you remember watching him in a Georgia jersey, and like what stood out to you watching him?
What really stood out to me was watching the Ohio State game versus Georgia, a couple of years ago. And, Marvin Harrison, he was the guy that year. And, Javon Bullard, he made a great play. He just knocked the whole momentum out of Ohio State. And, Georgia won.
So you're saying that wasn't targeting is what you were saying?
No, it wasn't targeting. It was a great play.
Amen. All right. I don't think you can tell the Zech Fort story without telling this key part as well. Like, you're going to go down and as the first ever 4-year captain in the history of IMG Academy. And before I get into any of that, like, have you ever taken a moment to realize how crazy that is? Like, people think high school football, they think IMG Academy. Like, has it really hit you that you're going to be kind of the first of your kind in that respect?
I can't really say it has, being like, that's not really important to me. Important to me is, winning games, putting my all out on the field, and, being the best teammate I can be. And I mean, I'll say it as an honor, but, hopefully there's more like freshman captains to come out and, 4-year captains come out of IMG Academy, but, being the first is definitely a blessing.
So, I mean, my first question on that is, how annoying must the seniors have thought you were when you came as a hotshot freshman and were already impressing coaches like that?
It's funny. It's actually funny you say that because, you know, what we do at IMG is, you know, the coaches, they don't select who's the captains. It's the players. So it was like 5 of the seniors who, you know, chose for me to be the next captain. So yeah, it was an honor, you know, like, you know, when your coaches, you know, when they have great things to say about you, that's special. But when all the players have great things to say about you too, that's special too.
That's respect. No, I'm kidding about the annoying part,
No,
obviously.
yeah.
And I will tell everyone.
Yeah.
I said it to you before we got on. Zech beat me to our own Zoom meeting for this show, so he's definitely the overachiever when we're talking about the two of us that are on this interview. But I mean, it's really cool that you're getting that recognition from your teammates. Probably means a lot to you, but there's a certain mentality I'm sure you have to have. You're making a cross-country trip. Like, you're going from Long Beach to Florida to really start your high school football career. Like, what was the mentality that you took making that really life-changing decision going to IMG Academy? Like, what was the mentality you had going there as a freshman that had kind of put you in the position that you ended up being in?
To be honest, my mentality was, you know, go in and kill, really. That's been my mentality ever since I was younger. My mom, she used to tell me, like, punish them. You know, as sweet as she is, she used to tell me that. And that just runs through, you know, my head when I'm playing the game of football. So, you know, I knew that going to IMG, there's going to be a lot of top guys, you know, and I'm coming in as an 8th grader, and they don't care. They don't care that I'm in 8th grade. You know, I had to work for it. That's all I did. All I did was work, and the work is paying off, and it's going to continue to pay off. So, yes, sir.
For sure. And I mean, just getting into that decision to go play at IMG, like how did IMG get into the picture for you? Like, again, like I just said, like, it's a life-changing decision having to, you know, move across. You live a different high school football experience than a lot of people do. Like, how did that become the high school choice that you wanted to make?
You know, I played in the 8th grade Under Armour All-American game, and after that game, I played really well. I had a pick and a couple tackles, and, you know, IMG reached out to me after that game, and, you know, me and my family decided this is the best opportunity, you know, for me to be able to get to my dreams of, you know, being a first-round pick and going to NFL, and also going to a school like University of Georgia, and it's definitely put me in that position.
What's the lifestyle like on that? Like, how often do you get to go back to California? Are you in Bradenton like all the time? Like, I don't even 100% know what your life looks like on a week in, week out basis.
So like right now, me and my mom and my dad, we live here in apartments. They're like 5 minutes from the school, because they moved to California, from California, going into my sophomore year. So you know, but before that, I was staying in the dorms, and I would just go back to California every break we had. So yeah, that's what it, you know, like, it looks like.
What's it like getting to hang out on that campus? Like, it's one of my favorite trips I do every year. I go down to the Future 50 in the summer, and I feel like I'm in paradise when I'm down there. I'd never want to leave that campus. But what's it actually getting, like, that being where you play your high school football? What's that like?
You know, it still doesn't like register to me sometimes, you know, that I'm at IMG Academy, you know, like the facilities we have like 20 soccer fields, 20 baseball fields, 5 football fields. We have a bunch of crazy stuff. So it's definitely surreal. In the weight room is like, it's like a college weight room. But what makes that place special though is definitely the coaches there, because we're getting coached by guys that played at the collegiate level, played in the NFL, you know. So it's definitely the people that makes that place special.
For sure. I mean, yeah, IMG Academy, one of a kind, obviously illustrious history, and actually leads me into a good question that, well, I don't know if it's a good question, but in something I found interesting. Can you guess, a little quick trivia, how many IMG Academy guys have signed with Georgia under Kirby Smart? Do you know the answer to that? It kind of surprised me.
What is it, 11?
That's a pretty good guess, honestly. So it was 13. You would be 14, obviously, if you sign in. You know,
yes, sir.
I know there's some other IMG Academy guys this year that are looking at Georgia too. We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, yes, sir.
But I'm just going to list out the names. So, Nolan Smith, Warren Brinson, Xavier Sori, Lavassier Carroll, Marlon Dean, Dalen Everett, going to be big for Georgia this year. Bear Alexander, Aluba, Terrell Foster probably doesn't get the love that he deserves in Georgia for what he's done ever since he's gotten as a walk-on linebacker for Georgia. Sam Mpemba, Gabe Harris, obviously Ellis Robinson, and Dominic Kelly. How many of those guys that I just listed out there did you actually cross paths with at IMG?
I crossed paths with Ellis Robinson, Gabe, Sam, Dominic Kelly. Those guys.
I'm sure. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, like Dalen, he signed like right before I got to IMG. So, but like when I go up to Georgia, though, I see all the IMG guys, and yeah. So
I'm curious, like, because you've seen Sam and Gabe and Ellis and Dom and obviously Dalen, you guys were pretty close to overlap. Is there can you see a Georgia guy and be like, that's a Georgia guy and that's why? Like, can you tell the defining qualities that make someone that makes sense for Georgia?
Yeah, definitely someone who loves football, someone who has passion for the game, and someone who plays with intensity, and is willing to work. And all of those guys, they definitely are that. My guy Dom Kelly, he's the newest addition. So that's my guy. He played his senior year here at IMG.
I was going to ask you about Ellis and Dom specifically, just because you probably got to be in a lot of position meeting rooms and defensive rooms with them. Like, Georgia fans haven't gotten to see a whole lot of those guys yet. Yeah. Like, get people excited. Why should they be excited about Ellis and Dom?
First, I'll just say Ellis, since he's been there a little longer. Ellis was the number one player in the country for a reason, and he's just super instinctual, super technical, athletic. His coverage skills, his approach to the game is just he's elite. And then Dom Kelly, he's tall, he's long, he's smart. He has great feet. So, both of those guys are really good, really technical, and they bring something special to the table. So, for sure.
It's like thinking about IMG Academy is really crazy when you think about all the people that have gone through there. And I'm sure the history, and I'm sure they have, trophy cases and things like that up there that have, or give people, experiences of the past. For you, when you think of the IMG Academy guys, I guess I'll put it this way. Who is your Mount Rushmore of IMG Academy guys in the history of IMG?
So that's 4 guys?
Yeah, that you're who's your 4? And it could be people you played with, or it could be people that were way before you that you think of as these are the guys that sort of set the precedent of what IMG was.
I'm gonna say the guys I play with, Jordan Hall, Ellis Robinson, Gavin Nix, Carnell Tate.
Okay.
And I'll say actually there's a lot of guys, but I'll just name those guys. But I just have so many more that I can't really put one over the other. There's just so many great players.
No, I know. I put you on the spot there, and there's so many great through the years. But as a guy in your case, it's going to have been there for 4 years. A lot of guys are not at IMG for 4 years. A lot of guys go, they go for a year, they go for 2 years. You've experienced it, and you are IMG in a way that a lot of guys, aren't. And I think that there's something special to that as well. I guess you and Carnell Tate probably would have had some good matchups through the years too, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we're going to play a game to sort of close things up. And this is a game that I basically can't play with any other guest that comes on. And it is dog or not. And I'm going to be asking you about your teammates on your IMG Academy team that have interest in Georgia. And, you can tell them after the fact whether you were, BSing me or not. But for the people, we're going to play a game, dog or not. So I'm going to go through and list out some guys. You tell me, do they end up as a dog or do they end up somewhere else? All right.
All right, yes, sir.
All right. So I'm gonna start, and I'm just going through. I'm gonna go with guys that have Georgia offers. So 4-star edge, Jake Cruel. I feel like he's got like 50 offers. Has a Georgia offer. I'm not sure if he's gonna take an OV, dog or not.
Probably not.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, I'm sure we're gonna have some sprinkled in here. We'll see. 5-star offensive lineman, Kenny Pepe.
Dog.
Georgia offer. He's going to take an official visit June 13th,
Yeah,
15th. Got Miami, USC, Texas, Florida. One of the best pass protecting offensive linemen in the country. What do we think?
Dog.
Dog. Okay, that's a headline grabber right there.
Trying to get him dog.
Okay. All right. I know he just got his Georgia OV set up, so I know that one will be competitive. He's an offensive tackle. All right. This is a good one. 4-star safety, Zech Fort. Dog, or does somebody steal him?
Dog.
No questions asked about that one. Be for real for a second. Like, does anyone else have a chance, or is it like you've shut this whole thing down?
I haven't shut it down, but I'm a dog.
Yeah. I hear you. All right. 3-star defensive lineman, Preston Carey. I think he took a junior day visit earlier this year. I'm not sure if he's got an OV scheduled or not. What do we think?
I'm not sure, but he definitely likes Georgia, so dog.
Okay. All right. I think there's going to be a couple interesting ones here down the stretch. So we've got 3-star offensive lineman, Niver Carr, someone whose recruiting stock should rise. I think one of the more underrated players in the country, in my personal opinion. June 13th to 15th official visit. That's basically IMG Academy Day in Athens, June 13th to 15th. But South Carolina, Florida, Miami. What do we think? That one's going to be competitive. What do we think?
Dog.
Okay. All right. Am I sensing some bias here potentially? Maybe we'll see. All right. And then here's another interesting one. 4-star offensive lineman, Brett Colleget. Surprise, surprise. He's going to have a 13th to 15th official visit as well. Tennessee, Miami, Oklahoma are in his top group.
Dog.
Okay. All right. That we don't want to tip anyone's decisions or
for sure. But
spoil anything or anything like that. I felt like there might be a couple dogs. And it sounds like you feel like the IMG Academy offensive line is like the best offensive line in the country.
Definitely. I'm trying to get all those guys to come. So
okay, cool. I guess is there anyone that I didn't ask about there that you're like, why'd you not ask about him?
I was maybe the younger guys, maybe like some younger guys.
Well, I was gonna ask you that. So who's next up? Like if I'm doing this show a year from now, 2 years from now, like who are the younger IMG Academy guys that you see me interviewing on this Georgia recruiting show in the future?
Jaden Wade, Sincere Gaylord.
Yep.
And Larry Moon.
Okay. All right. We're taking the Zech Fort. That's the Zech Fort crystal ball segment of the show. So everyone's going to take that as gospel. I'm sorry that I put you on the spot like that, but everyone's going to say, "Oh, Zech said it." So it's
Zech did say it. I'm gonna try my best to get those guys. So, yes, sir.
On a real note, though, obviously with guys like Breck and Carr and Kenye, there's a serious Georgia interest. You're all going to be on that June 13th to 15th official visit together. I'm assuming that's partially by design, but what do you talk to them about? When you explain why you chose Georgia, but also why you feel like Georgia makes sense for them, what's your pitch?
For them, obviously there's similarities and, but there's also differences. But I'll just say those guys, they want to play in the national championship every year. They're competitors. They want to win games and they want to be developed, to get to the next level. And they want to be a part of something that's elite. And we talk about that. And those guys, I know they have a lot of great schools to pick from. But I want them to come play at the University of Georgia. So.
No doubt. Well, I appreciate you playing along with that. You could have just been like, I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to say anything, but I appreciate you playing along. Really appreciate you for joining us on the show again. I know people are going to be excited to hear from you, and the rules now. Once you come on the show, I get to ask, and you got to come on again. I'll probably want to have you on around that June 13th visit, just kind of hear how things went. But now you're part of the show now, so you got to come on when we ask.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Zach.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Zach, great as always. You don't have to look very far to understand why he's going to be a 4-year captain at IMG Academy. Special guy. I know that, Jordan, you've heard some audio from our interviews in the past as well, but just anything stand out to you in particular from that?
No, it was a great interview. I honestly think that might have been my favorite since we've done the Stay Wolk UGA, and that's, all of them have been great, but I thought Zech was fantastic. Hearing his perspective about, being chosen by his teammates as a team captain. I'm a big fan of his mom. What did he say his mom said? Go punish them?
Punish them.
What?
As sweet as she is, punish them.
That's so good. No, I think that you got to be excited if you're a Georgia fan looking to him joining the Bulldogs. And maybe the most sort of eye-popping or intriguing thing I heard was him saying that he watches Javon Bullard, because I think when he committed, when we were on the show, I think we brought Javon's name up. So I think that that's really smart that, he sort of recognizes that and studies his game, because if he's able to translate that to Georgia like Javon Bullard did, that bodes pretty well.
For sure. I know typically we end up showing some highlights here. I don't feel like we did that when he committed on the show previously. So because it's been such a loaded show, I know we've got more that we want to get into before the end of the episode as well, but go check out Zech Fort's film. Everything that he said there is spot on. He is a tenacious defensive player. He is super savvy. Coaches trust everything about him and that he is going to be where he's supposed to be. And so a coach's dream when you turn on the film. And, I'll say this too, like he's at 5'11", 195, like he's not going out there and running a 4.3. Like he's not this type of, safety that is just going to dominate you based on his measurables. And I think that's a testament to just how sound of a football player that Zack Fort is, that he is the caliber of recruit that he is, that he had as much interest from Georgia as he did, despite not being the 6'3" safety that runs a 4.3. Like that's not who he is, and he knows exactly who he is. And I think that makes him a dangerous football player.
And going back to that interview, you can't really go wrong recruiting out of IMG Academy. Not everybody's going to be, not everyone is going to hit, but that was a pretty nice hit rate you had there of all the Georgia guys I've gotten out of there.
Especially a defensive back when you think about, recently. We obviously don't know what Dominic Kelly is going to be yet. I think Ellis Robinson has all the promise in the world, but you think about, on the defensive line. I actually didn't mention Jordan Hall because was he there? How long was he there? I don't even know. I don't think he graduated from there, so I didn't see him on the final list. So I might have even missed a name or two of guys that were at IMG at one point in time. All right, as always, we're going to wrap up the show hitting some of the fan favorite segments. We're going to start with arrow pointing up. And Jordan, I will let you take it away on arrow pointing up.
All right, first one, baseball season. Not really including the Atlanta Braves, who are now 0-7. But are we saying trust the process? Are we tanking 7 games in the season? No, but I think bigger picture. I love baseball season. The weather, we're starting to kind of get the spring weather here in Athens. And let's shout out Georgia baseball. They're now 29-2, going to Texas for a big 3-game series in Austin. I love baseball season. Ben, I think you do as well. And I love the spring season. I love the weather getting nice where we can go outside and enjoy some baseball. And maybe before too long, the Braves will give us something to celebrate.
Well, yeah, I need to get over to a Georgia baseball game. They look incredibly fun to watch. I will shamelessly plug our site at all times. And Olivia Sayer has done an unbelievable job covering Georgia baseball. And I think that, I don't know who the powers that be were that decided now is the exact moment in time we needed someone to cover Georgia baseball in an elite way, but man, did they pick the right time to do it. Braves, I'm not even going to give them the time of day on this show.
One other thing I'll shout out, not necessarily an arrow pointing up. It's kind of, I don't know what you would say here. I want to say RIP Val Kilmer, fantastic actor in so many good movies. And I was going to bring up, if you're listening to this, you're not going to see this clip. It has no audio. but it's a clip of Val Kilmer from the start of the movie Heat. And I had this thought separate, but our buddy Jake Rowe at Dogs HQ pointed this out too. Ben, you're kind of rocking the Val Kilmer look with the hair. Was that inspired by Val Kilmer?
Wait,
Have you ever noticed?
Jake didn't say this publicly, did he? He's not out here. He's not putting my hairstyles on blast publicly, is he?
No, this was a conversation. He just brought it up, and I was like, I swear the first time I saw Heat, when I saw Val Kilmer's hair, this is the very beginning of the movie, I was like, it kind of looks like the way Ben wears his hair.
You know, if I can, I'll take Val Kilmer. The comments that the people on our message board are liable to make about me and my hairstyle, if Val Kilmer is the least of my concerns, shout out to a legend, Val Kilmer. Obviously, very sad news to hear of his passing.
Now, do you see it is my question.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, I see it. Now I'm going to have to go watch this movie too. Underrated, great movie.
Fantastic. All right, over to you.
All right. I've got a few. I'll say April 7th. We've already talked about, the settlement date, and we might get an answer. We might not on April 7th. I will also be at Augusta National Golf Club for the first time on April 7th. So I believe our guy Kip Adams will also be there on Monday, April 7th, so about 4 days away from that. If all hell breaks loose in college football with this ruling, I might not even have my access to my phone at the point that this is all happening. So this is a arrow pointing up on April 7th being an important date, and also just a reminder for you that yet again, you might be responsible for doing my job for me.
Our boss called just before, Ben. They want to send you to the courtroom. So it sounds like that ticket's up for grabs. I don't want it to go to waste. I'll take it for you. I hate that, but I know you're so committed to the job that you're going to go. You're going to do a great job.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna give that one the time of day. I've waited my whole life for this day, and I can't believe that it's here. I even looked at the weather. It looks like it's gonna be a bad weather day for me. Don't care. I'm looking forward to it. I will put arrow pointing up on arrow pointing up because a few episodes ago during arrow pointing up, I threw out a little tidbit that one of the arrow pointing up was Georgia legacies, and I didn't want to get into the details of it at the time, but we now know, we have some news that the son of Richard Seymour, NFL Hall of Famer, his son London Seymour, played for the undefeated North Gwinnett high school football team this year, was supposed to sign with Boston College in December and didn't, and then thought he was going to in February and didn't. And around that time, around signing day, we started to get some word. I think I was even jumping the gun a little bit on signing day with you, Jordan, that we thought London Seymour might be signing with Georgia that day. That didn't end up happening, but I've been in contact with London throughout, the last few months, seeing how that thing was materializing. And every time a spring practice was coming out, it was like, oh, London Seymour is going to be there. Oh, London Seymour is going to be there. London Seymour is going to be there. And eventually I got to the point with London. I was like, are you ever going to actually let people know you're planning to be at Georgia? And he just eventually said, you know what? I'm fine. You can let the people know. So we did. It is official. He will be with Georgia officially come May. An interesting take because he was going to sign as a full-time scholarship athlete at Boston College. So anytime you're able to get a guy like that late, sort of a steal. I mean, he's 6'4", 300 plus. He has some traits that I could see him. People on our board brought it up. Like Richard Seymour was a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of his growth. I wouldn't call London Seymour a late bloomer because he's 6'4", 305 at the last time that I saw he got measured in. But someone, just intriguing. But arrow pointing up on arrow pointing up that we were able to give a little bit of intel during one of these segments as well.
Yeah, I think that's with London, that's a nice roll of the dice. I don't know that you have really anything to lose when you're Georgia. You've got a Georgia legacy. We know what his dad did at Georgia and in the NFL. I like taking a chance on him, and let's see what he does over these next few years.
All right. I'm using my I'm going to be good here, Jordan. I'm not trying to burn any bridges. I'm a great teammate. I love the work that our national site does. I love what some of the national shows that we have talking about recruiting. They do a fantastic job, but I'm going to go arrow pointing up on me having a little bit of a rant here, giving a take in response to a take from someone within the 24/7 umbrella. Smoke Dixon does an unbelievable job. Just before we got on here during their show earlier today, he had a comment about Kirby Smart and the general manager position. So I'm going to let you play that clip, and I'm going to give my response to it.
A bunch of gadgets in your play box. You don't really have many players.
Right.
You just have a bunch of little pieces that you hope that can work. But when you have somebody that's coming in and overlooking your roster from that 30,000 viewpoint of saying, okay, we have one gadget guy. That's all we need. If we need a backup for him, we can find it somewhere else. But we need a proven X, Z, F, U, whatever alphabetical letter that you want to say. But I'm going to put this team together through the vision of your eyes. Yeah. Lose out the emotions. Tell the coaches, I got it. But that's where a manager comes in. But also to be able to intervene for you in some of those meetings to negotiate contracts. In the NFL, rarely does a head coach negotiate a contract with a free agent.
Well, Kirby was already saying that he was sick of the agents and didn't want to deal with them. So that's somebody that would take care of that for
1,000%. You don't have to ever meet with them. I'll just bring back the information that you need to proceed on to the next player. Yeah. And if you don't like it, fine. I'll be the bad guy. You can MF me all you want and tell me, get that out of your face, but it's okay. I'm the guy that's standing in between you and that scum that wants to get into the office.
All right, well, let me start by saying shout out Smoke Dixon, shout out Bud Elliott, shout out Emily Proud, all three true pros. They do a great job. Great show. I love listening. I know that we had a little bit of a back and forth today as well talking about this, but it's something that obviously whenever national folks are talking about your more niche environment, obviously I'm going to get questions about it. People are going to want my takes on the matter. And to put it bluntly, the Kirby Smart and general manager conversation is one of the most pointless conversations that we could possibly have. And here I am about to have it again. Anyway, we talked about this a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about the shifting around of the collective and the athletic department. And I mentioned a lot of names of people within Georgia's football program: Will Myers, James Ellis, Stephen Drummond. We were talking about the collective side as well. Like, I think the biggest misnomer in all of this is that there needs to be someone with a general manager title for general manager responsibilities to take effect. And I think that there is this notion that because Georgia has not hired a general manager, that there aren't multiple people within Georgia's athletic department that take on being the general manager responsibilities. And I just called them out, but I'll call out two specifically. Will Myers and James Ellis have titles of director of player personnel and director of scouting. You put what those two do together and all of their responsibilities when it comes to talent evaluation, identifying, what Georgia needs on its roster, having conversations with agents and representatives and dealing with some of the negotiations and navigating the salary cap and everything that you would be expecting a general manager to do. I promise you, Will Myers and James Ellis do that at Georgia. And so do some people feel like there needs to be a general manager to have a general manager? Sure, I guess some people feel that way. Kirby Smart is never going to feel that way. And I had this brought up to me this way. These general managers at all these schools, they're all making, six figures, 100,000, 150,000, something like that. Answering to head coaches that are making $10 million plus dollars. I don't care what schools have GM titles. In no world is someone making $10 million just signing off and saying, hey, you in a completely different tax bracket from me are going to get to make final decisions that are going to impact my own financial future. Like, I don't even know right offhand, because Georgia has operated differently in terms of titling folks. Like, Steve Sarkisian gets final say over any general manager. Mario Cristobal gets final say over any general manager. Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day, Dabo Swinney, name any $10 million plus coach in college football, they might have a general manager by title, but the general manager doesn't just get to call the shots. In the NFL, oftentimes a head coach is answering to a general manager. That will never happen in Athens, Georgia, nor should it, given every proven track record that Kirby Smart has when it comes to recruiting, talent evaluation, and talent acquisition. So I hope that was a delicate way of saying, Smoke, respectfully disagree with your take that Georgia needs a general manager. There are people at Georgia that are the general manager, even if they don't have the title.
Well, first off, Ben, you kind of sounded like Kirby there. That's a misnomer. You've been listening to Kirby a little too much.
I feel I knew it the second I said it. I was like, wait, Kirby said misnomer to Josh Pate in our clip that we had earlier. So someone that is not on my side on this, maybe it's you, Smoke. Maybe I've just been brainwashed by Kirby Smart. I don't know. But I do think that Kirby Smart knows what he's doing. And he's not having to field 100% of these conversations just because he is acting as general manager. He has a great organization of people in place that are doing this. I thought you gave a great analogy before we got on the show that is similar to past conversations we've had in the Georgia world.
Yeah, the thing I compared it to was when Georgia did not have on its official roster in the media guide a special teams coach, and a kick will get blocked or there would be a muff punt and it'd be like, well, yeah, we don't have a special teams coach. It's being coached. It's just someone did not have that official title. The thing to me, Ben, like with what you just explained, like, maybe Kirby 10 years ago is really micromanaging and not letting other people get in, because he was like that with the defense. He was really trying to run it his first year. And I think in time, which is totally fair, he learned, I'm going to let my position coaches, my coordinators run their side of the ball. Maybe back then he would have been the only guy, if the college football world that we're in now was in operation then. But no, I mean, he's got plenty of people working with him. I thought you handled it quite well. That pretty much summed up what I was thinking. They're rolling right along, and Kirby's going to sign off on these guys, but getting plenty of input from the people around him along the way.
And I also love, for starters, I love when people give takes that I disagree with, this, because it just means that I'm able to disagree with them. So it's all love on my end on the 24/7 side of things. There's probably other takes in the 24/7 umbrella I probably could have gone on a rant about during this show, but I'll hold back on doing too much of that today. But just rest assured, Will Myers and James Ellis are good at their job. They know what they're doing. And I would say that there's many a general manager in college football that are doing the exact same types of things and have the exact same say-so and responsibility that those two guys combined to be able to have in Georgia's personnel department. All right. I've teased you a little bit. We're going to get to predict a commit. We are going to take two, but, and this is self-serving, I told you this, and I might be teasing a little bit too much with what I'm going to do here, but you have the option to let me correct. You can either take one guy today and only one, or you can take two, but if you take two, you have to replace someone that you have already taken on your board to take the second one. So you can either stick with what you've got and add one more, or you can take two new names and it'll be one additional, but it will be also a replacement for someone else. I'll give you the option. Which one are you going to do?
But before we do that, do you happen to have the list ready just where we can go over who our teams are?
Yes, I do. Do you want me to give you the full refresher on who you've taken?
More for the listener.
Yeah,
for
not for you. Definitely
yeah, not at all for me.
Okay, so you have running back Derek Cooper, linebacker Tyler Atkinson, defensive lineman Carter Lucky, tight end Mark Bowman, defensive back Jordan Smith, offensive lineman Jared Smith, edge Kamari Brooks, and quarterback Jared Curtis.
All right, Ben, go through your team too. Again, just for the listeners, for the viewers.
And for the listeners, for me, I've got offensive lineman Graham Houston, safety Zech Fort, running back Jay Lamar, offensive lineman Desmond Green, defensive back Tyreek Green, offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell, wide receiver Ryan Mosley, and offensive lineman Ekene Egboko.
All right. So am I picking first?
Well, I'm giving you the option. Do you want to take one or do you want to do two, but with a replacement? You get you get the option first, and then I'll get to tell you what order we're going in.
That's fair. I am so confident in the job that me and my general manager. You don't know the people behind the scenes over on my team, Ben. I got people working and scouting and checking in, mostly just reading your recruiting notes on Dogs 24/7. I'm just going to pick one person on this show.
Okay, well, that'll make things easier because, as you can probably imagine, because I created this rule, there's probably a reason why I created this rule, right? And 100%, I have decided that I want to make a little bit of a pivot to what I'm doing here. So I'll go first since I'm going to end up taking two, and I'll start with my replacement. You also came across this information at the same time that I did. So the fact that I'm about to steal this one from you is one of the more unethical things that I've done during this Predict to Commit segment, which I've done plenty of unethical things to steal or try and better my chances of having a better list than you. I am going to do a replacement. I put in a crystal ball pick earlier this week, and I also wrote a separate article as well. North Augusta High School, in honor of me going to Augusta this week. I figured, the South Carolina side, but still Augusta nonetheless. North Augusta High School, Malcolm Gaston, interior offensive lineman. He just visited last week. He's someone that I think Georgia has held in very high regard, more so than where his ranking is. Like Jordan's got his profile pulled up right now. Like he is not the highest rated offensive lineman that Georgia's recruiting, but Georgia really, really likes this guy. I think there have been times that he would have liked to have commit earlier in the process, and Georgia just wanted everyone to be kind of patient on the offensive line. He was in town this past weekend. Everything that I'm hearing is that Georgia knocked it out of the park, and I think things are trending in the right direction. Malcolm, I'll say this little tidbit about Malcolm. His nickname with all his friends is Big Mac. And wisely in the NIL era, when you call Malcolm Gaston right now, it's a picture of him decked out in his football gear, standing right in front of a McDonald's, and he is 100% positioning himself for a Big Mac McDonald's NIL deal. That would be what we would refer to as an above the cap deal if I'm talking to McDonald's. Hey, Big Mac, McDonald's works too perfectly. I am going to replace him. I'm going to replace Desmond Green with Malcolm Gaston. I am not ruling out the possibility that one of us very smartly adds Desmond Green back. In fact, you know what, Jordan? Because I will sacrifice my own here. You have the ability to take Desmond Green again. I do not. And I know what you might be thinking. Oh, why? Oh, Ben's giving me the option to take him. I shouldn't take him. I still think Desmond Green is a solid pick and possibility for him to wind up in this class. But I have sort of viewed Desmond Green and Malcolm Gaston similarly in terms of position fit. They're both South Carolina guys, like similar body types. Like I've kind of viewed it as an either or. Is there a world 2 months from now where both of those guys are in Georgia's class? 100%. But for the purposes of this game and this little wrinkle, I am going to replace Desmond Green. I'm going to throw in Malcolm Gaston, and you reserve the right to add Desmond Green to your team at some point in the future. But I have lost those privileges. And I'm sorry, Desmond. You're my guy. I think that you're a hell of a football player, and there is a fantastic chance that you end up at Georgia. But I am, for the sake of this wrinkle, adding Malcolm Gaston to my team.
No, I think it makes sense to pick Malcolm Gadsden. We got that information. Someone reached out to me while you were on vacation. Snooze you lose. I should have been able to get the first pick since you were on vacation. But no, I like that pick, and I think it makes sense to wind up dropping Desmond Green because, like you said, they fit very similarly. And I don't know necessarily, as you pointed out, if it would be one or the other. But I like where Georgia is with Malcolm Gaston right now. I hate to say it. It always hurts me, but I think you made a good pick.
All right. So you got your one. I'll let you go before I make my second pick of the day.
All right, we are going to go. I've done this once before, and I think you did it with one of your picks as well. When in doubt, think about family. Think about connections with Georgia. And I'm going to do that with my next pick with PJ Dean, Pierre Dean, who is the half-brother of former Georgia center Jared Wilson. PJ Dean, a guy I think that could be a center in the future for the Bulldogs, a guy that not only has that connection because of his brother, but has been on Georgia's radar for a long time, and is a guy that has had a chance to come around, has come to Athens, has familiarity with the coaching staff because of his brother. I like PJ Dean. I am adding him as a guy that will eventually be a center for the Bulldogs, just like his half brother.
And as we record this, he is on campus for a visit. He was at practice on Thursday. I will actually be at Under Armour Charlotte on Sunday. He's on the roster, so I'm expecting him to be there. I know plans change and things like that. So for those that subscribe to Dogs 24/7, you'll probably have more updates on PJ Dean here in the coming days. Someone that definitely could end up being the center of this class. One interesting thing, and it made me almost second guess my decision to replace Desmond Green, is Malcolm Gaston was telling me that he had some conversations about playing center as well, and how that comes into play, I think will dictate a lot for PJ Dean. Psyche Helton is another guy that Georgia likes at center. Like one of those guys, Malcolm Gaston, if they end up wanting him to play center, or PJ Dean or Psyche Helton, I expect will likely be the center of the class. And, you have Carter Lucky now, you have PJ Dean now, I have Ekene Boko. Like I think we have wisely added those family connections early in the predict to commit time of year. All right. So part of the reason, the method to the madness between me wanting to do this switch is I almost feel like I have a chance. I don't know, because there's still a lot to play out. I think I almost have a chance to be able to lock down the Georgia offensive line in this class with my next pick. I think Graham Houston is an interior offensive lineman that Georgia's sitting in really good position with in state. Again, whether it's an and or an or with Desmond Green or Malcolm Gaston, I'm not quite sure, but I like where things stand with Malcolm Gaston at this point in time. I've mentioned Ekene Boko being a tackle that Georgia really, really likes. I've taken a little bit of a flyer on Jackson Cantwell because I think that Jackson Cantwell is going to be an uber competitive recruitment, and there is a world where a month or 2 months from now, Jackson Cantwell or Georgia has had to go after other tackles. I've mentioned a couple just talking with Zech Fort on this show. But there is one more interior offensive lineman that I think Georgia is in great shape for. He was not in my first mock class 1.0. He will be in my mock class 2.0. It was a guy that I asked Zech Fort about with his IMG Academy teammates at the very end of that interview, and that is Brett Kolage. He's someone that I am told is very, very high on Georgia, and there's a lot of mutual respect there because of measurables and personality and look. He's going to draw a lot of Mason Short and Tate Ratledge comparisons, and I think that that's fair. His hair's a little bit blonder than those two guys, but similar vibes. And, I think you might have been able to see a little tell on Zech when he was talking about Breck, like that there were no questions asked on whether he was going to say dog or not dog for Brett Kolage. I think where things stand right now with Breck, Georgia is, I would consider, in the driver's seat. And so for me, this was more about trying to do the best I can to squeeze you out from being able to get a very large position group. Like, I think that there is a world where Georgia takes 5 offensive linemen, and it is Graham Houston. It is Ekene Boko. It is Malcolm Gaston. It is Brett Kolage. And then I think Jackson Cantwell is the big money recruitment that they would like to get in as well. If you want to try and, zig my zag a little bit, I might have some recommendations for you on who I would take on the offensive line if I were you. And I'm happy to give you those suggestions as well, because I think I've finally maxed out what I'm going to be able to do on the offensive line and predict to commit.
I think that's a good pick. When we were listening to the Zack Fort interview, I was halfway like, man, I should have my notebook out when you guys did the dog or not. Like, yeah, I think this is some pretty good intel. So, no, I like that. And And yeah, may need to see your recommendations. I'll have your people call my people, and we won't do it on air. We want to keep the people guessing, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I can throw you a little tip. I mean, Zach already said Kenye Pepe, dog, Nivry Card, dog. I feel like the chances of Georgia signing 3 offensive linemen from IMG Academy is slim. Maybe optimistic thinking from Zach a little bit. But, if Nivry Carr steals one of those interior offensive line spots, wouldn't shock me. I know Georgia loves him a lot. If, I know Kenye Pepe is really high on the board and one of the best pass protecting offensive linemen in the class. So if Georgia doesn't get Jackson Cantwell, is that a guy that I think Georgia maybe is more in this thing for? Yeah, I definitely think that's possible. So you have a chance to make me look real bad if I changed all the rules to manufacture me trying to put together the right offensive line. You could end up with the actual right offensive line when it's all said and done.
We'll see what happens. I don't want to gloat because you've made some good picks along the way. I think if you don't hit the whole offensive line, I think you've got some good ones to choose from.
All right. Well, awesome show. I know we just ran 2 hours so for those that are listening on podcasts, I hope you had a long car ride that you were able to get all of that through. For those of you that were watching on YouTube or on Twitter live with us, we really appreciate you. I've already gotten positive feedback on some of the things that we've talked about throughout the course of this show. So thank you all for joining us. Likely won't have an episode next week. I'm still going to be on my Masters Augusta National high by the time that you're going to need me talking about anything. So that's just not going to happen next week. But after G-Day, I would expect there to be a lot of relevant things to talk about. So we'll see who we can get for a potential interview for the post G-Day show. Once G-Day hits, coaches are going to be on the road going out and doing their spring evals for about a month and a half. So there's going to be a lot to cover. As always, Dogs 24/7 subscription. You pointed out to me as well. I didn't mention the first time around. We do have a 50% off special going right now. Can you tell the folks how long that's running until?
It's going to run out real quick. It's definitely not that I don't remember when the date is, but when you hear this, you better get on it because it will end.
I hope it's not too late. I hope you've already jumped on it. For those of you that already subscribe, we appreciate you. We love having you over there at on the Junkyard, engaging with us on the message board, reading all of our content. Obviously, like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Leave us a review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate Zech Fort for coming on the show. I thought he was fantastic and someone that Georgia fans are going to love following his journey for a long, long time. So with that, I'm your host, Ben Wolk, with Jordan Hill. This was another episode of the Stay Wolk UGA Recruiting Show, and we will see you in a couple weeks.